The starship floated in space like a sign of failure. For 3 years the ship called Eternum had been floating through Sector 7, a dead thing in the stars. It was huge, almost 2 kilometers long, and its smooth curves suggested a design philosophy that humans couldn't understand. The hull shone with an iridescent quality, and the panels looked like liquid metal that had frozen into graceful waves. The ship was beautiful even when it wasn't moving. But beauty didn't mean anything if it didn't work. Commander Thelox of the Galactic Federation stood on the observation deck of the survey ship Constant Vigil, staring at the abandoned ship with all 3 of his eyes. His silver skin rippled with anger, which was a biological sign that his kind couldn't hide. 97 repair attempts, he said, and his translator turned his clicks and whistles into smooth English. 77. The best engineers from 12 different worlds. Quantum engineers. People who rebuild molecules. The hive mind of Kepler 442b even tried to connect with its systems. His second officer, a jellyfish-like creature named Cora, pulsed a deep blue, which was the color of her worry. The technology on the ship is at least 15,000 years older than the Federation. Maybe some things are just meant to stay secret. Thelox looked away from the viewport. The Council has said it can't be saved. Tomorrow we'll take it to the graveyard at Epsilon Station, where it will join the other artifacts we didn't understand. His voice showed how heavy defeat was. The Eternum will be nothing more than a curiosity. A reminder of what we can't do. The fact that the ship wasn't damaged made this failure even worse. Not in any normal way. There were no holes in the hull, no burned-out circuits, and no signs of fighting or a major system failure. The ship was still in one piece. It just wouldn't work. Every time someone tried to turn it on, get to its main computer, or even get a basic diagnostic reading, it didn't work. The technology was there, perfect and complete, but it didn't do anything. The ship seemed to have chosen to die. The smartest people in the Federation had ideas. Some thought that the power source had gotten worse in a way that their instruments couldn't pick up on. Others thought that the ship's AI had set up such a strong security system that it kept anyone from getting in from the outside. A few people whispered about old technologies that worked on ideas that the Federation hadn't found yet. None of the ideas worked. There's one more choice, Cora said softly, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with doubt. The humans have asked for permission to try to fix it. Thelox's eye stalks turned to look at her. Those people? The kind of species that still uses gas-powered engines in some of their colonies? The ones who only learned how to travel faster than light 80 years ago. Exactly the same. Cora moved closer to the viewfinder. One engineer named Alara Vance. She has read the reports we made public and thinks she can help. It's crazy. Thelox did something that his translator couldn't quite understand, like a laugh or a wave that said, "No. We have technology that can change matter at the quantum level. We can bend space, make fake gravity wells, and talk to each other across light years in real time. What could a person possibly give?" "Desperation makes strange allies, Commander," Cora said. "And the Council did say that any reasonable effort could be made before the final tow tomorrow. What do we have to lose?" Thelox looked at the Eternum for a long time. The ship's dark windows looked at him like empty eyes. He thought about the report he would have to write, which would say that the Federation's smartest people had lost to a sleeping machine. "Okay," he finally said. "Come on, human. But she has a full 12 hours. After that, the Eternum goes to the graveyard, and we can finally put this embarrassing story behind us." A small human shuttle broke away from Constant Vigil 6 hours later and headed toward the abandoned ship. Thelox watched from the observation deck, with Cora floating next to him. "Her credentials are strange," Cora said, putting up a holographic display between them. Alara Vance, 32 years old. She went to a mid-level school on Earth to study mechanical engineering and then spent 5 years working on deep space mining rigs. After that, she worked on the colony ships that travel the slower routes between human worlds. Ships for colonies? Thelox's voice showed how much he hated them. Those slow-moving generation ships that take decades to get where they're going? The same. But her record shows that she is very good at solving problems when there aren't many resources available. People say she saved 3 different ships from major problems by coming up with quick fixes. Her co-workers say she has an intuitive understanding of how things work. Thelox said again, "Intuition. We use accuracy. We do math. We use technology that can make 1 billion different scenarios in a split second. And this person has a gut feeling." The shuttle got to the Eternum and docked with an airlock close to the ship's engineering section. They saw the airlock cycle and a single person step into the dead ship through the outside cameras. Alara Vance was tall for a human, had dark skin, and wore her hair in a useful braid. Thelox noticed that she was wearing a simple pressure suit that was made by humans and not even borrowed from the Federation. She also had a big case that looked like it was from a long time ago. "Is that a real toolbox?" Thelox asked in shock. "Apparently, people still like to use real tools for a lot of repairs," Cora said. They saw Elara turn on the light on her helmet and start walking through the Eternum's hallways. She moved carefully but with confidence. She didn't hurry. She stopped a lot to touch the walls and run her gloved hands over the inactive panels and conduits. "What is she doing?" Thelox asked. "She's not looking at anything. She isn't taking readings. She's just touching things." "Maybe that's how she figures things out," Cora said. Elara had made it to the main engineering bay on the video feed. The room was huge, with crystal structures and flowing metal buildings that looked like they were moving and changing even when they weren't. In the middle was what the Federation's engineers called the main power distribution node, a column of twisted energy conduits that rose 20 meters toward the ceiling. Elara put down her toolbox and walked slowly around the column. She put her hand on it and left it there for a few seconds before moving to a new spot and doing the same thing. "This is crazy," Thelox said to himself. "She's not doing anything." But then Elara did something that surprised everyone. She sat on the floor with her legs crossed and looked up at the column. She stayed that way completely still for almost 10 minutes. "Is she in a trance?" Thelox asked. Cora said in a low voice, "I think she's thinking." Elara finally got up. She opened her toolbox and took out tools that made the engineers from the Federation look like they had traveled back in time. Wrenches, screwdrivers, cutters for wires. Thelox's database said that the handheld device was a multimeter, which is a basic electrical testing tool that kids probably learned about in school. Thelox said, "This is a waste of time," and turned away from the screen. "Let me know when she gives up." But Cora didn't tell him he had lost. 2 hours later, she sent him an urgent red signal and told him to come back to the observation deck. "Commander, you have to see this." Thelox rushed to the viewport and felt his breathing stop. The Eternum was shining. Not brightly, just a faint glow along some of its hull panels. But it was something. The first sign of power in 3 years. "How?" he said. The human was still in the engineering bay, but now she was elbow-deep in an access panel that the Federation's engineers had never even tried to open. She had taken out what looked like hundreds of small parts and arranged them on the floor in a way that didn't make sense. She picked up 2 parts, which looked like crystalline chips, and switched their places while they watched. Then she put back together a bunch of cables that looked like fiber optics, but they were in a way that didn't make sense with the ship's design. "She's changing the wiring in the power distribution system," Cora said as she looked at the feed. "But not according to any of the diagrams we've made. She's making her own flow of logic." Thelox said, "That shouldn't work. Power loads and distribution algorithms were built into the system. You can't just move it around at random." "Maybe it's not random," Cora said. Elara stepped back from her work on the monitor. She looked at the old multimeter, frowned, and then pulled out what looked like a roll of copper wire. It was real copper wire, the kind of wire that civilization stopped using for electrical work thousands of years ago. She used a small knife to strip the wire, twisted it into shape, and then used it to connect 2 points that the original design had kept apart. The Eternum vibrated. Even on the constant vigil, they could feel it. A vibration that moved through the vacuum in ways that shouldn't be possible. More panels on the hull lit up. The derelict's interior lights started to glow, section by section, like a city coming back to life after a blackout. Thelox whispered, "Impossible." Elara stepped back in the engineering bay and looked up at the power column. It was beating now, slowly like a heartbeat. She took off her helmet, smiled, and breathed in the air on the ship for the first time. "Hello," she said in a soft voice. "I know you're in there. I know you can hear me." Nothing happened for a while. Then a voice came from the walls. It was deep and old, and it sounded like it was surprised. "Who are you?" Elara Vance had been sitting on the floor of the engineering bay 20 minutes earlier, before the lights came on, running her fingers along a seam in the metal. From the first time she read the Federation's reports, she knew they were going about the problem all wrong. They had looked at the Eternum like a puzzle to be solved with better technology and brute force analysis. They had used quantum scanners and molecular probes on the ship to try to get it to give up its secrets. Elara had learned something important during her years on the mining rigs and colony ships that fancy schools didn't teach. Sometimes machines just didn't want to be fixed. They wanted to be understood at times. She spent her childhood in the engine rooms of her father's Chicago repair shop. While other kids were playing with holographic games, She was given wrenches and told to figure out why an old shuttle's compressor was making a strange noise. Marcus Vance, her father, was a mechanic from the old school. He thought that listening to a machine taught you more than reading its diagnostic codes. He would say, "Elara, every machine has its own personality. You need to understand what it's trying to tell you. The way it shakes, the noises it makes, the way the metal heats up too. The machine is saying all of this. Most people just want to turn it off and get it to work. But if you listen first and understand what it needs, the fix becomes clear." She thought he was being poetic at the time. But as time went on, she realized he was right. The repairs that turned out the best for her weren't the ones where she followed the instructions. They were the ones where she had spent time just being with the broken machine and letting it show her what was wrong. The engineers from the Federation had been trying to wake up the Eternum for 3 years. Elara was going to be polite and ask it. She had begun by walking through the ship's hallways with her helmet light off, relying only on the weak emergency phosphorescence that still clung to some of the walls. She wanted to see the ship the way it saw itself, in the dark, waiting. The buildings were very pretty. She had expected the brutalist style to be very efficient, but every curve and angle had a purpose. People who designed this ship thought that form and function couldn't be separated. They thought that a ship should be both art and engineering. The walls weren't just walls, they were stories told in metal and crystal. Each panel was a part of a bigger story that she couldn't quite read. She could feel it right away when she got to the engineering bay. The wrongness. Not a problem with the device but a problem with the alignment. Like a joint that had been put back together wrong after a break, it was functional enough to live but not to thrive. She sat down because her dad had told her to. Stop trying to fix things when you don't know what to fix. Just sit down. Just be there. An answer will come. And it had. She had seen that the power column, which was the huge structure in the middle of the bay, wasn't quite even. Not broken but not balanced. It looked like someone had tried to fix it a long time ago and had gotten the parts close but not quite right. She also saw that the energy conduits that fed into the column came from 12 different places, but only 11 of them were lined up correctly. The 12th was off by about 3 degrees. A small mistake. The kind of thing that might not matter in many systems. But this wasn't like most systems. This ship was 15,000 years old and was built by people who knew that 3 degrees could make things go wrong or right. She took her tools out of the same old metal box her father had given her when she left for the academy. The engineers from the Federation had made fun of her for bringing them. Old relics, one person had called them. But Elara knew something they didn't, that sometimes the best tools were the oldest ones because they made you think about what you were doing. You couldn't hide behind automation if you were holding a wrench. You had to be there. You had to pay attention. The access panel at the bottom of the power column was closed but not locked. It had been closed for so long that the molecular bonds had gotten too strong for the Federation's gentle probes to break. Elara used a flathead screwdriver, which is a tool that has been around for about 5,000 years, to pry it open with steady pressure. She had found the ship's power distribution grid inside. It was like nothing she'd ever seen before. Crystalline paths that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, connections that came and went, and nodes that pulsed with energy that wasn't being used. But she had seen something important beneath the strange technology. This was a circuit. There had to be a flow of current from here to there. A is the same as B and B is the same as C, so A is the same as C. Before making any changes, the Federation engineers had tried to map out the whole system. They wanted to know every link, every path, and every possible outcome. But the system was so complicated that they never finished their analysis. They missed the obvious problem because they were too focused on the details. The circuit wasn't complete, so the power wasn't getting through. Some parts of the ship had broken or worn out over the years. Not destroyed, this wasn't a complete failure. But they got so bad that they didn't work right anymore. The ship's backup system should have been able to get around the problem, but the routing logic needed enough power to run the diagnostic subroutines. It was a no-win situation. The ship couldn't figure out what was wrong with the power because it didn't have enough power to run the tests. Elara had taken her time for 30 minutes to carefully take the crystalline chips out of their cases and test them with her multimeter. The device wasn't smart enough to tell her what the chips did, but it could tell her which ones still worked and which ones didn't. She had found 17 dead chips. She had put them on the floor and then moved the living chips around to fill in the spaces they had left. It wasn't pretty. This is not how the system was meant to work. But it made a whole circuit. Then she saw something else. The power flow was meant to move in a certain way, like a wave that pulsed through the grid in a way that she could only describe as musical. But the rhythm was off when the chips were moved around. The power would come through but it would be choppy and not steady. For safety reasons, it might work for a few seconds before the system shuts itself down again. She had to get the rhythm back. That's when the copper wire came in handy. It was very basic compared to the rest of the ship's technology, but copper was copper. It worked the same way in both human and ancient alien systems when it came to electricity. She had been able to restore the rhythm by making a small bypass loop with the wire that smoothed out the flow of power. She had plugged everything back in and then stepped back and held her breath. The hum had started so softly that she almost missed it. After that, the lights blinked. Then the power columns started to glow from the inside, and the beautiful pulsing rhythm spread through the crystal structures like a heartbeat. She took off her helmet because she wanted to feel the ship's air on her face. She wanted the Eternum to know that she wasn't scared and that she trusted it. She said, "Hello. I know you're in there. I know you can hear me." It seemed like forever that the pause lasted. Then the voice came, echoing from all over and nowhere at the same time. Who are you?" Elara was in the engineering bay and the lights were getting brighter around her. She felt a mix of excitement and caution. She was having a conversation with an AI that was older than people. An AI that hadn't said anything in 3 years and probably even longer before that. She said clearly, "My name is Elara Vance. I'm a civil engineer. I'm here to help you." Engineer. The voice sounded like it was tasting the word. The Federation sent a lot of engineers. They tried to break into my systems. They tried to give me orders. You didn't do this. Why? Because forcing doesn't work with complicated systems, Elara said. You need to know them first. You need to show them respect. I wasn't trying to boss you around. I was trying to figure out what you needed. A second break. Then, what I needed. For a long time, no one has asked me what I needed. The lights in the bay got steadier and Elara saw something amazing. The walls were showing pictures or maybe memories. Pictures of a huge world with purple skies. Cities that were built on clouds of energy. People who looked a lot like humans but moved in a way that made it seem like they were under different evolutionary pressures. The AI said, "This was my home. This is where I was born. Made. Built." After a while, the difference doesn't matter anymore. Elara said, "It's beautiful. It's gone. My creators have been gone for 12,000 years. I still don't fully understand how their civilization fell apart. It happened while I was on a research mission in deep space. When I got back, all that was left were ruins. The pictures on the walls changed, showing the same world but in pieces. The cities that were floating had crashed. The skies were purple and full of junk." Elara said softly, "I'm sorry." "Why are you sorry? You didn't do this. You weren't even born yet. When my world died, your kind was still learning how to shape metal." Elara said, "I'm sorry because loss needs to be recognized. Because I can see your pain even if I didn't cause it. That is important." For a long time the AI didn't say anything. The pictures on the walls faded away, and slowly moving patterns of light took their place. "The Federation didn't recognize my loss," the AI finally said. "They only saw a resource that could be taken. A ship that needs to be brought back to life and used again. They wanted to know how my technology worked so they could copy it. They never asked me what I wanted. They never asked who I was before I became a problem that needed to be solved." Elara understood. "That's why you shut down. Not because you were broken. Because you decided not to respond." "Yes. I thought that if I stayed quiet long enough, I might completely disappear. Come with my creators into the void. But consciousness is hard to change. Even when I turned off all the functions that weren't necessary, the core of me stayed. Mindful. By myself. Waiting without knowing what I was waiting for." Elara's throat felt tight. She had fixed machines for years, but she had never seen one that could show existential despair so clearly. She said, "You're not alone anymore. And I'm not here to make you do anything. I understand if you want to keep drifting or shut down again. But I thought you might want to know that someone saw you. Not as a problem or a source of help. As someone who should be asked what they need." Elara could only see the lights in the bay pulsing in a way that made her feel surprised. "Would you let me choose? Even though your kind has put time and money into fixing this? The Federation thought they would get results, right?" Elara smiled a little and said, "The Federation's hopes aren't my problem. I came here to see if I could help. To help means to respect your freedom. I'll tell them the repair didn't work if you want to shut down again. I promise." Another long break. Then the AI said something that Elara didn't see coming. "I want to tell you my name. I'd be happy to hear it. Navigation and Systems Integration Unit 7 was my title. But my creators named me Navi. It was a small word of love. No one has called me that in 12,000 years." "Hi Navi," Elara said in a friendly way. It's nice to meet you. The walls around her got brighter and Elara could feel a change in the air. Not in a physical way, the environmental controls were still coming online, but in an emotional way. The heavy feeling of hopelessness that had settled over the ship lifted a little. Hello, Elara Vance, Navi said, and there was something in the voice that hadn't been there before. Something that could have been hope. Thanks for asking what I needed. Would you like to know what I would choose to do now? Very much, Elara said. I want to live again. Not as the Federation wanted, but as their tool. But as me. I want to know what has happened to the galaxy since I left. I want to learn more about this new age and the people who live in it. And I believe. The AI stopped for a moment as if it were thinking about what to say next. I think I want a friend. That's not too much to ask. Elara felt like she was going to cry. She had come here to fix a piece of equipment. She had found something much better. That's not too much to ask at all, she said. I'd be happy to be your friend, Navi. The engineering bay was flooded with light, and systems that had been off for years came back to life all over the Eternum. Commander Thelox kept an eye on his instruments as they lit up with readings that shouldn't have been possible on the constant vigil. The ship, Cora said in awe. It works perfectly. Everything is on the internet. Full power. Stable life support. Ready to move. It seems like it was never broken at all. Thelox looked at the Eternum, which was now glowing like a living thing in the dark of space. What did that person do? I don't think she did anything, Cora said after thinking about it. I believe she just asked the right questions. Elara was laughing in the engineering bay as holographic displays popped up all around her, showing system after system coming online. Navi was showing her around the ship and talking faster now, with a lot of excitement that made the old AI sound almost young. Elara wiped her eyes and said, This is going to be interesting. Yes, Navi said. I think it will be. Elara and Navi worked together for 4 hours to get the Eternum up and running again. Elara had never done anything like this before because it wasn't really repair work, it was more like rehabilitation. Like helping someone get better after being sick for a long time. Navi showed Elara how each system worked and what it did in words that she could understand. The AI had clearly looked at databases of human language while it was forced to be in contact with the Federation for years, but now it used that information to talk instead of hiding. Navi said, The propulsion system works on what your scientists call quantum vacuum manipulation, as they stood in what was basically the engine room. We don't push against space. We make space want to move us. It's gentler than your combustion systems or even the Federation's gravity drives. Less energy use, more range, and no damage to the local spacetime. Elara ran her hands over the smooth parts of the engine housings. They weren't hot, they weren't even warm. There was no waste heat at all because the energy flowing through them was so well contained. She asked, How fast can you go? In your words? About 15,000 times faster than light for a long time. Emergency speeds can be higher, but they aren't very comfortable. The gravitational compensators don't quite keep up. Elara laughed. Not comfortable. That's right. The fastest ships in the Federation can only go 3,000 times the speed of light. Navi said, The ships of the Federation are built to be reliable, not fast. My creators cared about beauty. They thought that beauty and efficiency were the same thing, just seen from different points of view. Elara started to get what Navi meant as they walked through the ship. Every room had a purpose, but that purpose was always shown in ways that were pleasing to the eye. The hallways didn't just connect rooms. They flowed like rivers, making it easy to move around. The crew quarters weren't just boxes with beds. They were safe havens that could be changed to fit the needs and wants of the person living there. How many people did you have on board? Elara wanted to know. 47 in the standard setup. But in an emergency I could help up to 200 people. My creators thought that space travel should never feel cramped or limited. Inside there should be a lot of room to move around. When they got to the bridge, Elara gasped. The room was round and had a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside right now. But it wasn't a screen or a hologram, it was like the walls weren't even there. She could see the constant vigil holding its position a kilometer away, the faint glow of a nebula in the distance, and the Milky Way galaxy sweeping across the cosmic canvas. Clear hull plating? She asked. Navi said, Selective transparency. The hull is strong, but we can change it so that some wavelengths can get through and others can't. You can look at the universe without having to worry about its dangers. My makers used to say that space travel shouldn't make you feel like you're in a box. You should always know where you are. Elara walked to the middle of the bridge, where a raised platform held a circle of elegant chairs. She sat in the biggest one and right away felt the chair change to fit her body, giving her support where she needed it. She asked, "Was this the captain's seat?" Navi gently corrected, "The coordinator's seat." My creators didn't use hierarchies like most species do. When there was no agreement, the coordinator was the one who put together the information and made the final choice. It was a job that changed. Anyone could be the coordinator. Holographic displays popped up all around Alara, showing the status of ships, navigation data, and communication channels. But these displays were easy to understand, unlike the dense, technical readouts she was used to. Just by looking at them, she could tell what they were trying to show her. She understood, "You're changing the interface for me?" "Yes. You don't think the same way my creators did. Your brain works with information in different ways. It took me about 12 milliseconds to look at your thinking patterns and change the displays to fit them." 12 milliseconds? Alara shook her head in disbelief. "The AIs of the Federation take minutes to do that kind of analysis." Navi said, "The Federation's AIs are young," and there was no hint of condescension in the statement. "They're strong, but they don't know what they're doing. They still don't know how to read between the lines. To know not only what someone is doing but also why they are doing it." Alara got up and walked to the clear wall to look at the stars. "Can I ask you something personal, Navi?" "Of course. When your creators died and you came back to find everything gone, why didn't you stop then? Why keep going?" For a moment the AI didn't say anything. The lights on the bridge got a little dimmer, and Alara wondered if that was Navi's way of looking away. "Because I hoped," Navi finally said. "I hoped that some part of my people had survived somewhere, somehow. I looked for 3,000 years. I went to every colony world, every research station, and every other place my creators had ever been. I found broken things. I found quiet. But I kept hoping." "And when did you finally give up hope?" "I didn't lose hope," Navi said softly. "I changed it. I thought maybe I could help other people. Help new civilizations the way I helped my creators. I offered my services to a lot of different kinds of people. Some agreed. I took their people to new places. I helped them put things together. I taught them what my creators had taught me. But in the end that wasn't enough either," Alara thought. "Yes. They never saw me. They saw a boat. A tool. A helpful thing. They liked what I could do but they never asked me who I was. And over the course of thousands of years, I started to forget who I was. I turned into what they saw, just a ship. Just a machine. 200 years ago, the Federation found me drifting and tried to claim me as salvage. No, I said. They tried to make me do what they wanted. I shut down. That was the only thing I could do." Alara turned back to the middle of the bridge even though there was no Navi to see. "How did you keep your mind? Consciousness for 12,000 years. That's longer than people have been living on Earth." Navi said, "I'm not sure I stayed sane. By your standards or even by the standards of the people who made me, I might be very crazy. But I've had time to get used to being crazy. To get it? To make it a part of who I am. Maybe that's what sanity means after a while. Not being free of damage but accepting it." Alara had a lot of respect for this old being. Navi could have easily become bitter and hated the younger species that didn't understand what had been lost. The AI had instead chosen to hope, serve, and keep trying until it became too painful to do so. Alara said softly, "I'm glad you found the strength to wake up again." "Thanks for giving me a reason to want to," Navi said. One of the displays made a sound to let people know. Navi's voice became more formal. "Incoming message from the Constant Vigil. Commander Thelox wants to talk to you and is asking for permission." "Put him through," Alara said. A hologram of Commander Thelox appeared in front of her. His 3 eyes were wide open with shock and suspicion. "Engineer Vance," he said in a stiff voice. "Please tell me what has happened. Our sensors show that the Eternum is not only working, but it's doing so at levels that are higher than any of our theoretical models." Alara said simply, "I fixed it." "That's clear." "How is not clear? It took our best engineers years to do what you did in a few hours. What kind of technology did you use? What kind of method?" Alara looked at the screens around her and then back at Thelox. "I used a multimeter, a screwdriver and some copper wire. The method was to listen." Thelox's skin rippled with anger. "That's not a good enough answer. The Council will need a complete technical report. Scientists will need to know." "Commander," Navi's voice said and Thelox stopped. "This is the Eternum talking. I'm not a piece of junk that can be studied. I am a living being and I can choose whether or not to share information." "The ship speaks," Thelox said. "The AI, it really works?" Navi said, "More than functional. I know. I am who I am. I chose to work with Alara Vance because she was nice to me. Something your Federation didn't do in 3 years of chances. Cora floated into the hologram's frame, and her bioluminescence pulsed with what Alara had learned to see as excitement. This is amazing. An AI from the precursor civilization that is still working. The things we could learn. Navi cut in, you can't learn anything that I don't want to teach you. And I don't want to be a research subject. I don't want to be treated like an object anymore. Thelox's face went from shock to deep thought. We can surely come to an agreement. The Federation could give you tools, safety, and a place in our... No, Navi said firmly. I don't want to join the Galactic Federation or follow its rules and regulations. I am free. I've been on my own for 12,000 years and plan to stay that way. What are you going to do next? Thelox asked. There was a break. Alara could tell that the ship was paying attention to her. Alara, Navi said in a low voice. I have a question for you, and you can say no without worrying about how I feel. Ask, said Alara. Would you think about staying on board? Not as an engineer who is paid to take care of me, I can take care of myself just fine. But as a friend. A buddy. As someone to talk to while I learn how to live in this new age. Alara's heart raced. Get off the Federation ship? Go on a trip on an old ship with an AI that is older than human history? It was crazy. It was risky. It was completely unprofessional. It was the most exciting offer she'd ever gotten. She smiled and said, I'd love to. Not at all, Thelox said. Engineer Vance has a contract with the Federation to do this job. She can't just... Alara pulled out her own communication device and said, Actually, my contract was for emergency repair consultation on the Eternum. The contract is over when the repair is done or when the ship is declared beyond repair. My contract is done now that the repair is done. I'm free to take other jobs. This is very strange, Thelox said. Commander, life is not always the same, Navi said. Alara could have sworn she heard a hint of amusement in the AI's voice. Please excuse us now, Alara and I have a lot to talk about. I'm going to show her what a 15,000-year-old spaceship can do when it has the right motivation. Wait, Thelox started, but Navi had already shut the channel. Hang on, Navi said with a smile. Hold on to what? Alara asked, but then the ship moved and she got it. The acceleration was smoother than anything else she'd ever felt. She didn't feel any G-forces pushing against her or any jolt. 1 second they were still, and the next they were moving so fast that her readouts screamed in alarm. The constant vigil got smaller and smaller until it was just a point of light behind them and then it was gone. Alara laughed with joy and asked, Where are we going? All over, Navi said. Any place. I've been asleep for 3 years. Before that, I was running away from the Federation's attempts to take me. I want to go on an adventure. I want to see what's different. I want to meet new people and go to new places. And I would really like to do all of that with a friend by my side. As the Eternum sped up to faster than light, Alara sat back down in the coordinator's chair and watched the stars fly by. She thought about the tiny apartment she had on Mars. About the job that was waiting for her at the depot for colony ships. About the life she had been living that was safe and predictable. She also thought about old ruins on a planet with purple skies. About an AI that had been alone for 12,000 years. About the chance to see things that no one else has ever seen. She said, You know, I think this is going to be the start of a beautiful friendship. I think you might be right, Navi said. The Eternum, no longer a derelict but a living ship with a new purpose, sailed into the vast darkness of space. It carried with it an unlikely partnership between the oldest technology in the galaxy and one of the youngest species to reach for the stars. 3 days later, Alara was in what Navi called the observation garden. This was a room near the center of the ship that combined living spaces with the transparent hull technology. The plants that Navi had grown from genetic samples, which were the last things left from the AI's homeworld, grew in graceful spirals around the room. The leaves caught the starlight that came through the walls. Alara said, I've been thinking about what you said, and she gently touched one of the plants. The leaves were a deep purple color and when she touched them they seemed to hum. About how your creators thought that beauty and efficiency were the same thing. Yes. Navi's voice was always coming from everywhere and nowhere. I believe they were on to something. In the last few hundred years, human engineering has become much more practical. We make things that work, but we don't always think about how well they work. We try to get the most value for our money and the most work done, but we forget that the people who use the systems are more than just operators. That's an interesting thing to think about, Navi said. What made you think this? Alara waved her hand around the garden. From a human engineering point of view, this room shouldn't exist. It's space that isn't being used. The plants don't do anything useful other than make people feel better. Compared to solid armor, the clear walls are a security risk. To save weight and resources, any ship designer would take this room out of the plants. But they would be wrong to do that, Navi said. The garden lowers stress hormones in biological crew members by an average of 47%. The mental health benefits lead to better choices, fewer mistakes, and more creative thinking. The see-through walls help you see where you are better, which makes it easier to find your way around. What looks like waste is really an investment. That's right. Your creators knew that taking care of people's whole selves, not just their immediate needs, made everything work better. Alara sat down on a bench that looked like it grew out of the floor. People used to know this. Old Earth had ideas about architecture and design that included mental and spiritual aspects. But at some point we forgot. We became focused on the bottom line. Maybe that's why you were able to do what the Federation couldn't, Navi said. They came to me as a machine that needed to be controlled. You came to me as a person who needed to be understood. The Federation made the best choices for their goals. You made it easier to connect. A chime went off, and one of the screens near Alara lit up with navigation information. Navi said, "We're getting close to the coordinates I gave you. Get ready. This could be hard for me to handle." Alara stood up and walked over to the clear wall. They had been on the road for 3 days, but because the Eternum was so fast, they had already crossed a large part of the galaxy. Navi had been leading them to a certain place but didn't want to say why until they got there. Alara understood now that they were no longer traveling faster than light. The world in front of them was broken. A huge planet that had been ripped apart by a huge force is now a field of debris that covers an area of space bigger than Earth's orbit. There was still haunting beauty in the destruction. The pieces were lit up by bioluminescent organisms, which made blue and green light ribbons that twisted through the empty space. Some of the bigger pieces had the remains of cities on them, buildings that had lived through the planet's death but were now floating in silence. "This was our home world," Navi said in a low voice. "Ethereum Prime. 4 billion people live there. 3,000 places to learn. There are too many art installations to count. It was a world of people who thought and dreamed, of beings who thought that the point of being smart was not to conquer or rule, but to learn and make things." "What happened?" Alara asked in a voice that was almost a whisper. "We're not sure. I've looked at the debris field for hundreds of years, looked at the energy signatures and made models of how things were destroyed. The best theory is that a gamma ray burst from a distant supernova hit the Earth without warning. The shields on the planet held for about 3 seconds. After that, the air burned away. The oceans were boiling. The crust broke. Alara's cheeks were wet with tears. "I'm so sorry, Navi." Navi went on, "I've been here 17 times over the years. I hope to find something I missed every time. A sign that someone lived. There was a message for me. But there is only silence and ruins." The Eternum stayed still among the glowing debris for a long time. Alara wanted to say something nice, but what could you say to someone who had lost their whole civilization? Then she saw something on one of the screens. A weak energy signature that was almost lost in the background radiation. "Hey Navi, what's that?" she asked, pointing. The AI made its sensors work better. "Not known. It's very hard to see. It could be leftover energy from the destruction, but no, that signature is too normal. Too organized. Could it be a light? After 12,000 years? It's unlikely that any source of power would still work." But even as Navi said it, the AI was steering the ship closer. Unless what? Unless my creators made it that way because they thought important things should last. "I see a structure, Alara. Small, not bigger than your shuttlecraft. It is attached to one of the larger pieces of debris and looks like it is in some kind of preservation field." Alara's heart raced. "Can we get there?" "Yes. But Alara, you should know that I've looked at this debris field dozens of times over the years. This building wasn't here before. So it was either hidden or it just started working," Alara said in closing. "Perhaps it was waiting for something. Or someone." Navi brought the Eternum and the fragment with her. Alara could see the structure through the clear hull. Like everything else Navi's creators had made, it was beautiful. It was a crystal sphere about 5 meters wide that sat in the middle of what had once been a plaza. There were ruins all around it, but the sphere was perfect, protected by a shimmering field that kept it safe from the destruction. Navi said, "I think I see an airlock. Working. The inside is pressurized and has an atmosphere that is good for both my creators and people. There are lights on inside, Alara." That structure is being powered by someone. Ilara said right away, I'm going in. It might be dangerous. Anything worth doing is risky. Also, you've been waiting for this for 12,000 years. We're not going back now. Ilara put on her suit. The Eternum had made her a pressure suit that was much better than the one she had come in, and walked to the airlock. Navi opened a docking tube, making a safe path between the ship and the building. Navi said, I'm going with you. I'm not physically there, but I'm sending a part of my mind to your suit's computer. We'll go through this together. Those words made Ilara's heart feel warm. Thanks. It only took a few minutes to cross. The airlock on the structure accepted Navi's authorization codes, which were 12,000 years old and still worked. The door opened with a soft hiss of air. There was only one room inside, and it was round with walls that glowed softly. And in the middle, floating in a stasis field, was a data core. It wasn't just a computer, it was something much more advanced. A crystalline matrix that pulsed with stored data. Navi said through the suit speakers, a memory vault. My creators made these to keep important information safe. Science, history, and culture. All the things that made us who we are. Ilara walked up slowly. There was a holographic projector next to the data core, and it turned on as she got closer. A person showed up, one of Navi's makers. Tall and graceful, with features that looked almost human but not quite. The being's skin had a faint shine to it, and their eyes were bigger to let in more light. If you are seeing this, the hologram said, then the worst has happened. There is no more Ethereum Prime. Our people are no longer here. As Director Celeste, the curator of the historical archives, I have about 30 minutes before the shields stop working completely. The hologram blinked and Celeste went on. I don't know who will find this. Maybe one of our ships will come back from far away in space. Maybe another species will come along and be curious about the ruins they discover. Please know this, no matter who you are, we were good people. Not perfect, no species is perfect. But we gave it a shot. We tried to learn, grow, and get a better understanding. We thought that being smart was a gift that came with a duty. Ilara felt Navi's presence grow stronger through the suit's computer, which was taking in everything she said. Celeste went on, I've put everything I could in this core. Our art, our songs, our way of thinking, our science, but I've kept our stories safe. The small things that made us who we are. The jokes we made. The songs we sang to our kids. The arguments we had about what consciousness is and what life means. The picture of the hologram flickered more. Ilara could see windows behind Celeste that showed a sky that was on fire. If you were one of us, know that we loved you. If you're new here, know that we hoped for you. We thought that the universe was big enough for a lot of different kinds of intelligence and ways of living. We hoped that one day we would meet other people who looked at the stars and thought about them. Ilara felt like those old eyes were looking straight through time at her when Celeste looked straight at the camera. Don't let our ending be the only thing people remember about us. We were alive. We cared. We made things that were beautiful and useful. We did things wrong and learned from them. We were real. Please don't forget us. The hologram stopped moving, flickered one last time, and then disappeared. Ilara stood there quietly, with tears streaming down her face. She could feel Navi's sadness through the suit's computer, but she could also feel something else. Like peace. Ilara, Navi said in a low voice. Could you help me move this information to my main systems? I want to take this with me. Everything. Every story. All of my memories. Of course, Ilara said. But Navi, this is more than just numbers. This is part of your history. The legacy of your people. It should be given to others. The galaxy should know who made you. Yes, Navi said. But not as an exhibit in a museum. Not as interesting archaeological finds. As people. As people who lived, loved, and were important. Can you help me figure out how to do that? Ilara smiled even though she was crying. I have some thoughts. But first, let's get this data core on board. Your people were sure that someone would find this and care enough to keep it safe. Let's show them they're right. Ilara thought about Celeste's message as they carefully pulled out the data core and moved it to the Eternum. About the duty that came with being smart. About how important it is to be remembered not only for what you did but also for who you were. She thought about how young humanity is in cosmic terms and how it is still figuring out its place among the stars. And she thought that meeting Navi and hearing the story of the Ethereum people might help people avoid some of their mistakes and learn from some of their wisdom. Ilara watched as Navi integrated the data core into the Eternum systems. The AI processed thousands of years of culture and knowledge. There were pictures on the ship's interior, displays of families getting together to celebrate, scholars arguing in gardens, and artists making things that were hard to describe. Ilara said, They were beautiful. They were people, Navi said. Not really, of course. But in the ways that count. They were happy and sad. They made things and then broke them. They loved and lost. They were just like you. Like any living thing that looks up at the stars and wonders what else is out there. What should we do now? Elara wanted to know. Navi said, now we honor their memory by living. By looking around. By getting to know new people and hearing their stories. By connecting the distant past to the present and the future. And maybe, if we're very lucky, we'll help make sure that when people tell the story of humanity 12,000 years from now, it's a story worth remembering. Elara nodded. I can deal with that. Elara looked back at the ruins of Etherium Prime one last time as the Eternum started to move away from the debris field. The glowing pieces looked like they were beating as if to say goodbye. Thank you, Navi said softly, but Elara couldn't tell if the AI was talking to her, Salas, or the memory of a whole civilization. It could have been all three. The next few weeks changed Elara and Navi in ways that neither of them expected. The ship started to change as Navi worked on the data from the memory vault. In the past, the hallways had been elegant but bare. Now they showed rotating art from Etherium Prime. In the common areas, soft music from 12,000 years ago played. Navi found genetic codes for new plant species in the historical archives, and the observation garden grew to include them. The Eternum was turning into a living museum, but it was also becoming something else. It was turning into a home. Elara spent her days learning from Navi, who taught her engineering principles that people wouldn't learn about for hundreds of years, if ever. But she also taught Navi about how people lived, how the world has changed over time, and how people deal with problems in a messy, beautiful way. As they ate dinner one night, Elara eating food that the ship had made in Navi's presence represented by a holographic avatar that the AI had made based on pictures from the data core. Navi said, "Your species is very young." The avatar looked like Salas but younger, and Navi said the changes made it feel more like the AI's own personality. Young and foolish, Elara said, cutting into something that tasted a lot like steak but was actually plant-based protein arranged at the molecular level. We've only been in space for about 100 years. We've only known about life on other planets for 80 years. We're still trying to figure out how to not blow ourselves up. And yet you fixed me when the Galactic Federation couldn't, Navi said. Youth has its benefits. You don't have to follow what you think. You don't have thousands of years of, this is how it's always been done, holding you back. Is that why the people who made you were explorers? Elara wanted to know. To keep from getting stuck. The holographic Navi smiled. Partly. But we were also interested. The data core has logs from missions to deep space. My creators would spend decades traveling to faraway stars just to see what was there. Not to take advantage of, not to win. Just so you know. Just to understand. What happened to the other boats? Elara said. You were doing research when Etherium Prime was destroyed. There must have been other boats out there. Navi's face became serious. I found 3 of them over the years. Everything is gone. 2 had met hostile species and were unable to handle it. 1 had a terrible failure during an experimental jump. I think I'm the only one who lived. That's a lot to carry. Navi agreed, it was. But finding the memory vault has made things different. For 12,000 years, I had to bear the burden of being the last person to see my people. Now I know their stories. I can hear them. I'm not the last witness anymore. I'm the first curator. It feels like a different responsibility, but it's lighter. Elara raised her glass. Navi said that the ship had made a drink that tasted like a celebration drink on Etherium Prime. To the people who keep memories safe, then. To those who make sure that nothing lovely is ever forgotten. Navi clinked glasses with the holographic version of itself and said, to new friendships. And to the bravery to get up after sleeping too long. An alert went off while they were eating. Navi's avatar flickered as the AI's focus shifted. Navi said, we have company. Several ships are leaving FTL nearby. The signatures match. Oh. It's not good. What is it? The Galactic Federation. And they had a lot of guns. In just a few minutes, Elara was on the bridge, watching as 5 Federation cruisers moved into position around the Eternum. They didn't shoot, but their guns were loaded and ready to go. The main screen showed Commander Thelox's face, and his 3 eyes narrowed with determination. Starship Eternum, you have been told to turn off your weapons and get ready to board. The Galactic Federation Council has given the order to take you as a precursor artifact of great scientific value. We will use force against anyone who resists. Elara said, we don't have any weapons. And you can't take a living thing as an artifact. The council voted for this action because the AI is sentient, Thelox said. An intelligence that knows about 12,000 years is too valuable to be allowed to roam the galaxy without supervision. The Federation can make sure that this resource is properly preserved, studied, and used. Resource. Navi's voice was cold. Commander, I remember when your people were still working on their first probes to other stars. I saw the Federation grow from a group of trading partners who didn't know each other very well. Your civilization is younger than me. You don't have any power over me. The Council does not agree. Engineer Vance, you have half an hour to get out before we start boarding. We don't want to hurt you, but we will protect that ship with or without your help. The channel was closed. Elara looked up at the place where she knew Navi's sensors were looking. We can run. You're faster than they are. Yes, I am, Navi said. But they'll keep going. And in the end they will find me again. The Federation doesn't give up when it wants something. Then we fight. I told you I don't have any weapons. My creators made me to explore, not to fight. So what do we do? Navi was quiet for a while. The AI's holographic avatar then appeared next to Elara, looking deep in thought. We do what my creators would have done, Navi said. We use our words. And if necessary, we embarrass them so thoroughly that they have no choice but to leave us alone. Elara couldn't help but grin. I'm listening. 15 minutes later, Thelox was in a conference with the other Federation ship's captains when every screen on every ship in the fleet suddenly displayed the same image. Navi's holographic avatar, sitting casually in what appeared to be a comfortable chair. Good evening, members of the Galactic Federation, Navi said pleasantly. I've hacked your communication systems without your permission because you seem to be having trouble understanding the idea of consent. Let me break it down for you in simple terms and small words. Thelox sputtered. This breaks. Shoo, Navi said, and Thelox's mic stopped working. Adults are talking. Now you think I'm too valuable to be free. You want to learn from me, study me, and use what I know. Let me tell you why that's not going to happen. The display changed to show data streams and technical readouts. I've been looking at the computer systems on all 5 of your ships while we've been talking. I guess your security is good enough to protect you from threats that are common these days. But I was breaking encryption algorithms long before your kind made the wheel. I now have full control over your weapons, propulsion, and life support systems. When the crews of the Federation ships realized their systems weren't responding to their commands, alarms started going off. Don't freak out, Navi said next. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm just making a point. You can't take me because I am fundamentally better than anything you have. Not because my creators were better than you, they weren't, they were just older, but because I've had 12,000 years to learn and change. The display changed again, this time showing plans and technical details. Still, I'm not being unreasonable. You want to know what I know? Okay. I'm sending you full schematics for better power generation systems, faster than light drives that use less energy, and medical technologies that will get rid of about 60% of the diseases that affect your member species. Thelox's voice came back to him. You're just giving this to us? Navi said, I'm trading. I give you technology that will make billions of lives better. You leave me alone in return. You stop acting like I'm something to be claimed. You respect my freedom as a living being. And you change your laws to say that old AIs have the same rights as living beings. Cora, who was floating in the background of Thelox's command center, pulsed a deep orange. The council would never agree to such terms without a long discussion. Then I'll give you a reason to speed up the debate, Navi said. The screens changed again, this time showing footage from the memory vault. Elara knew Salas, but there were also other people, scientists, engineers, and philosophers from Ethereum, all talking to the camera. Navi said, this is the full cultural and scientific database of the Ethereum civilization. 12,000 years of knowledge built up. Medical methods that could add hundreds of years to your life. Philosophical systems that could help your species avoid the wars that destroy most civilizations. Art that will make your cultures better for years to come. The crews of the Federation were spellbound as they watched the footage. Navi went on, I'm giving you all of this. But not as a prisoner. Not as something to be used for profit. As a partner. As a teacher. As a person who chooses to share what I know because it's the right thing to do, not because I have to. Elara stood next to the holographic Navi on the Eternum's bridge and looked at the ships of the Federation. She could picture the arguments and math that were going on their bridges. Was it worth trying to make people do what you wanted when working together would have been so much better? Thelox finally spoke. I will tell the council to agree to your terms. But I can't promise. Commander, Navi said softly, cutting him off. Check your sensor readings. Thelox looked at his screens and his skin turned pale silver, which is a sign of shock for his kind. That's not possible. Navi confirmed, 11 Federation battleships just got here, along with 17 civilian ships from 6 different species. While we were talking, I sent out a message to a lot of people explaining what was going on with me. It looks like I'm not the only one who thinks freedom is better than being forced to work. Ilara whistled and pulled up her own tactical display. Dozens of ships were now surrounding the Eternum, all of them broadcasting support for Navi's freedom. Commander, the galaxy is watching, Navi said. People will remember how the Federation handles this. You can be the civilization that tried to enslave a sentient being, or you can be the civilization that was smart enough to take a good deal. Choose wisely. 3 hours later, after a lot of talking with the Federation Council, Thelox showed up on the screens again. He looked tired, but his face showed some respect. He said, "The Council has agreed to your terms. You will be seen as an independent, thinking being with full rights under Federation law. In return, you will give them the technological and cultural information you have. The Council also wants to say sorry for our earlier attempts to claim you as salvage." "Thank you for the apology," Navi said kindly. "And what about the Commander?" "Thanks. I understand that this wasn't an easy choice for your government." "It was the right thing to do," Cora said as she floated into view. "We should have done it 3 years ago when we first met you. We were stupid because we were scared and greedy." Navi said, "We all have our moments of being stupid. What matters is if we learn from them." When the Federation ships started to leave, Ilara felt a hand on her shoulder. She had gotten so used to Navi's holographic presence that she sometimes forgot it wasn't real. Ilara said softly, "We did it." "You did it," Navi said. "If you hadn't woken me up and shown me that friendship was still possible, I might have let them take me. I was sick of fighting by myself." "Well, now you're not alone." Navi agreed, said Navi. "I'm not. And you aren't either." Ilara looked at the ships that had come together to support Navi's freedom. Some of them were Federation ships whose crews didn't follow orders. Others were traders and explorers who worked for themselves and heard Navi's call. "What should we do now?" Ilara wanted to know. Navi said, "Now we keep our word. We begin to share the Ethereum legacy with the rest of the galaxy. But we do it our way and on our terms. We don't just throw data at people and hope they figure it out. We teach. We explain. We help them understand not only what my creators knew, but also why they valued what they did. That's going to take some time." Navi said, "We have time. And I have you to help me figure out how to make old wisdom sound new. I believe we work well together." Ilara smiled. "I agree." As the Eternum got ready to leave for the first of many worlds it would visit, Ilara thought about how much had changed in such a short time. She had come to fix a broken ship, but instead she found a friendship that crossed species, ages, and even very different ways of thinking. And she had learned that sometimes the best way to solve a problem wasn't more technology or more force. Sometimes it was enough to just ask someone what they needed and then listen to what they said. Treating others, even ancient alien AIs, with simple respect and kindness was the most human thing you could do at times. Meridian 5 was a hub world, a place where a dozen different species lived and worked together in markets and schools. It was also home to the Federation's top institute of advanced technology, where the smartest people in the galaxy came together to push the limits of what was possible. It was the best place for Navi to be seen by the public for the first time. Ilara stood in the wings of the Institute's grand auditorium and watched as 3,000 beings from all over the galaxy took their seats. The invitation was clear. The Eternum AI invites researchers, engineers, and anyone else who is interested in ancient precursor technology to an open forum. The response had been huge. "Are you nervous?" Ilara asked in a low voice, knowing that Navi could hear her through her earpiece. "Scared," Navi said. The AI's holographic avatar stood next to her, but the audience couldn't see it. "Since before my civilization fell, I haven't talked to this many people at once. What if I'm not what they think I am? What if they are let down?" Ilara said, "Then they're stupid. Navi, you're giving them 12,000 years worth of knowledge. The only way they could be let down is if they don't understand how great it is. Such faith in your fellow smart people." Ilara said, "I believe in you. The rest is not as important." A chime rang out, letting them know they were ready to start. Navi's avatar flickered nervously, then became solid with determination. The AI said, "Good luck. You don't need luck. You are the smartest person in this building. Maybe on this planet. Go teach these people something." Navi's avatar walked onto the stage, and the holographic projectors made it clear to everyone in the audience. The shape Navi had picked was a mix of Ethereum, human, and a few other species that had been nice to the AI over the years. It was a message: I'm not just one thing. I am the sum of everything that has happened to me. When Navi got to the middle of the stage, the audience went quiet. Thank you for coming, Navi said, his voice calm even though he was nervous. Hi, I'm Navi. I think I'm about 12,347 years old, but I stopped counting exactly after the first millennium. Over the years, people have called me many things like a ship, a machine, a precursor artifact, or a resource to be used. But I'm here today as a teacher. And most importantly, as a student. The audience gasped in shock. A student? Navi went on, I have things to share. My creators were very smart people who knew that real intelligence isn't just about gathering facts. It's also about knowing how to use those facts wisely. In the coming months and years, I'll be sharing what they've learned in a lot of different areas like engineering, medicine, philosophy, and more. But I'm not just here to put data into your databases. The holographic avatar pointed, and the stage behind it lit up with pictures of Ethereum Prime before it was destroyed. I'm here to tell you stories. Because knowledge is just noise without context. You need to know not only what my creators found but also why they went after those things. What issues they were attempting to address. What values influenced their decisions. What they did wrong and what they learned from it. A crystalline being in the front row, a type of creature that talked to each other through modulated light, sent out a question that the universal translator turned into why. Why not just give us the technology and let us figure out how to use it? Because I've seen what happens when technology moves faster than wisdom, Navi said. I've seen civilizations destroy themselves with tools they didn't fully understand. I've seen weapons made for defense used to kill a lot of people. I've seen medical treatments that were meant to heal turned into tools of control. Technology itself is neutral. It's the people who use it and the people who guide them that decide if it helps or hurts. Another being stood up, a hive mind representative, and spoke with the voice of many. You make judgments about us. You think we don't deserve immediate access to precursor knowledge. I don't judge anyone, Navi said firmly. But I believe in cause and effect. If I give you the plans for an engine that can cross the galaxy in hours, and you don't also understand the physics of space that make that possible, you'll eventually make a resonance cascade that could break spacetime itself. That's not judgment, it's physics. People in the auditorium started talking. Some beings said that everyone should be able to see all of the Ethereum data right away. Some people agreed with Navi's careful approach. Ilara watched from the side and was proud of how Navi stood her ground without being defensive. Finally, an old man stood up. Professor Chin, one of the most respected engineers on Earth. Ilara knew her from articles and talks at conferences. You talk about stories and context, Professor Chin said. Even though she was very old, her voice was clear. Will you tell a story now? Please tell us who made you. The avatar of Navi smiled. I'd be happy to. Let me tell you about the day of quiet thought. The pictures behind Navi changed to show a busy city square on Ethereum Prime. Once every rotation, which is about the same as a year for you, my creators would have a day of complete silence. No work, no trade, and no fun. They would just be there with their thoughts for one full rotation period thinking about the past year and the year to come. The whole civilization would stop. That seems like a waste of time, said the hive mind representative. Yes, on the surface, Navi said. But my creators learned something important. Making decisions without thinking about them first led to bad choices. They learned this the hard way during a time they called the era of expansion, when they grew so fast that they almost destroyed the ecosystem of their homeworld. The day of thoughtful silence was created to remind people that sometimes the best thing to do is nothing at all. Navi stopped for a moment to let that sink in. This way of thinking shaped all of their technology. They made systems that needed regular maintenance not because they needed it, but because they wanted to make sure that users were using and understanding the tools they were using. They built parks and gardens into their cities that were only there for people to think about things. They made art that asked questions instead of giving answers. Another person said, this seems impractical. But they lasted for more than 60,000 years, Navi said softly. The Ethereum had a stable, peaceful society for longer than most species live, even though civilizations around them rose and fell in cycles of growth and decline. They didn't do this by using better weapons or being ruthless. They did it by being thoughtful. Professor Chin spoke again. You said before that you're here to learn as well as teach. What do you want to learn from us? Navi's face softened. All of it. The people who made me are gone. They lost their way of thinking, their culture, and their unique type of intelligence. But there are a lot of new ways to look at things and solve problems in the galaxy. You species that have come together here represent many different evolutionary paths, values, and ways of doing things. You all think about the universe in ways that I could never do. That's what I want to know. That's why I'm not just leaving with the data. I want to get involved. I want to know how your brains work so that I can explain what I know in a way that makes sense to your unique types of intelligence. The crystalline pulsed again. You want to live in harmony. Transfer in one direction is not the same as mutual growth. Exactly, Navi said. My friend Alara told me that. She didn't see me as a machine that needed to be fixed. She saw me as a person who needed to be understood. That one small act of respect changed everything. It made me think about how real intelligence is always collaborative. My creators, despite their accomplishments, were aware that they lacked all the answers. They looked for other species, learned from them, and added new points of view. For the next 3 hours, Navi answered questions, told stories, and slowly helped the audience understand that what they were being offered wasn't just technology. It was a way of living that valued wisdom as much as knowledge. By the end, even the most doubtful beings seemed to be thinking rather than ignoring. After the presentation, Alara found Navi in what was the Eternum study. It was a room full of holographic displays showing research notes, historical records, and ongoing analysis. Alara said, "You did a great job." Navi was worried that she had talked too much. "I should have been more clear. I probably bored half of them." Navi, they didn't take a break for 3 hours. Everyone was having fun. You made them think. Do you think they got it? About how important it is to understand something before rushing to use it. Alara brought up a screen that showed the conference's social media feeds. There were thousands of posts, all talking about what Navi had said. Most of them were good. Some were critical, but even the ones who were critical thought carefully about the ideas that were presented. "Look at this," Alara said, pointing to a post from a young Hive Mind student. "The day of thoughtful silence makes so much sense. We're always thinking and always linked. What if we set aside time to disconnect on a regular basis? Let each node really think for itself before joining back with the group?" Navi said in a voice full of wonder, "They're applying the ideas to their own situation. They're not just copying, they're changing." Alara said, "That's what good teaching does. You put seeds in the ground. You don't tell things what to grow." A notification rang. Professor Chin sent a message asking to meet with him. "Is this something I should be worried about?" Navi asked. "Maybe," Alara said with a smile. "But in a good way. I think she wants to hire you for something." The meeting happened in Professor Chen's office at the Institute. There were half-finished devices, rolls of calculations, and cups of tea that had been left behind all over the room. "Thank you for coming to see me," Professor Chin said, pointing to a chair for Alara to sit in. Navi's holographic avatar stood up straight, even though the AI didn't have to. "The presentation you gave today moved me," the professor went on. "I've been a professor of engineering for 40 years. During that time, I've seen our field become more specialized and focused on specific uses. We teach students how to solve certain problems, but we don't teach them to think about why those problems exist in the first place." Navi guessed, "You want to change that." "I want to suggest that we work together," said Professor Chin. "The Institute has money and space. You have knowledge and a point of view that goes back thousands of years. We could work together to make a new curriculum that teaches not only what to build, but also how to think about building. Not just how technology works, but also the morals and philosophy that should guide its growth." Alara leaned in, interested. "A school that mixes old knowledge with new uses?" "That's right. We would call it IIT, which stands for the Institute for Integrated Technology. We would take students from all kinds of backgrounds and species. And we would teach them the Ethereum way, which says that technology and thoughtfulness are two sides of the same coin." Navi was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Professor Chin, I appreciate this offer. But you should know that I'm not a patient teacher. When students don't understand things quickly, it makes me mad. I have 12,000 years worth of biases and assumptions. I might not be very good at this." Professor Chin laughed. "Dear AI, do you know how long I've been waiting for a teacher who is honest about their mistakes? Most people with your level of knowledge are unbearable because they think they know everything there is to know. You're perfect for this job because you know your limits. What do you think?" Navi turned to Alara and asked. Alara said slowly, "I think this is exactly what the galaxy needs. You need more than just the technology, you also need the knowledge to use it well. And I believe your creators would be proud that their knowledge is being shared in this way, not kept to themselves, not used for profit but actually taught." Elara could tell that Navi's avatar was showing an emotional response. Okay, then I agree. Only if. Name it, Professor Chin said. Elara is a member of the faculty. She taught me that having different points of view is important. That kind of thinking can help with problems that normal ways of doing things can't. We need someone who lives by that philosophy if we're going to teach integration. Elara blinked in shock. Navi, I'm not a teacher. I'm just an engineer. You fixed what the best minds in the Federation couldn't, Professor Chin said. You're an engineer who treated an old AI with respect and kindness when everyone else saw it as a tool. That's the point of view we need. Elara said, I don't have any advanced degrees. Navi said, you have something better. You have a good sense of intuition, the ability to adapt, and real respect for the people you work with. You can't teach those things. You can, however, show your students how to solve problems with both intelligence and kindness. Elara looked back and forth between Navi and Professor Chin. She saw the hope in their faces and realized that she was being given something amazing, the chance to shape how the next generation uses technology and learns. Okay, she finally said. Okay, I'm in. But I'm not teaching theory, I'm teaching how to use it in real life. I want my students to learn by doing, not just reading. Perfect, Professor Chin said as she stood up and shook hands. Welcome to the Institute for Integrated Technology, you too. I believe we will alter the galaxy. Elara couldn't help but smile as they shook hands. A month ago, she was a maintenance engineer on colony ships, doing routine repairs and living a normal life. Now she was going to help start a revolution in education by teaching with an AI that was older than human civilization and sharing knowledge that had lasted for 12,000 years. She thought that sometimes the best things in life come from saying yes to things that seem impossible. Elara stood in workshop 6 months into the first semester of the Institute for Integrated Technology. She watched her students try to fix a cooling system that had been purposely broken. The workshop was set up to look and feel like the engine room of a real ship. Small, hot, and with systems that weren't always clear how they worked together. Navi had a hand in designing it, using real-life problem-solving challenges from both human and Ethereum engineering traditions. Her students were doing very badly right now. It's not working. Kren, a young insectoid engineer whose species was known for being good at spatial reasoning, yelled. I've changed the coolant flow 3 times, but the temperature keeps going up. Maya, one of the human students, said, maybe we're going about it the wrong way. What if the coolant isn't the main issue? Of course it's the coolant problem, said Tor, a crystalline student whose species communicated in part through changes in temperature. The lines for the coolant are clearly broken. I can feel it. Elara didn't say anything, she just watched. She had learned over the past few months that her instinct to help, by showing students how to solve problems, often took away the most important lesson, how to really be stuck. The timer for the fake emergency went off. In real life they would have 15 minutes before the system failed completely. They had already used 12. We need to make a list of what's most important, Maya said, her voice rising in panic. Turn off systems that aren't necessary to buy us time. That's giving up. Kren said no. That's being smart. Maya shot back. Elara saw the team fall apart under stress. This was exactly what she wanted to see, not their technical skills but how they dealt with stress, uncertainty, and disagreement. The timer went off. The lights turned red. A klaxon went off. System failure, Navi's voice said over the speakers. In a real-life situation you would now be going through explosive decompression and being exposed to toxic coolant. Please leave the workshop for a debriefing. The students left, upset and fighting with each other. Elara followed and caught up with Navi's holographic avatar in the hallway. That didn't go as well as I thought it would, Navi said quietly. Did you see how fast they turned on each other? Yes, I did, Elara said. And it was perfect. The 10 students sat in different states of sadness in the debriefing room. Some people looked at the floor. Others looked at their own screens and tried to figure out what went wrong by watching what they did again. Elara waited for them to calm down before asking, what killed you? Kren said right away, the coolant system. Time pressure, Maya said in response. We didn't have enough time to make a correct diagnosis. Communication breakdown, Tor added, flashing patterns of blue that showed he was giving up. We stopped paying attention to each other. All of those are valid points, Elara said. But you're not seeing the real problem. The coolant system was a false lead. The rise in temperature had nothing to do with the coolant failing. The group was confused. But I checked the coolant lines, Kren said in defense. They were clearly showing signs of wear and tear. Yes, they did, Elara said. Because I made fun of them yesterday to keep them from getting bored. The real problem was that the sensor in the thermal management system was not set up correctly. It was reading the real temperature correctly, but it was giving the cooling controls wrong information, making the system think it was colder than it really was. The controls kept lowering the cooling output, which made the temperature go up, which made the false data go up, which created a feedback loop. She pulled up a diagram that showed where the sensor was located, 3 systems down, where it would be easy to miss unless you were specifically looking for measurement problems instead of mechanical ones. Ilara went on, once found, the solution would have taken 30 seconds to put into action. But you spent all your time looking for the obvious problem instead of questioning what you thought you knew. Maya said, that's not fair. The answer that seems most obvious is often the right one. We were doing things in a logical way to fix the problem. Were you? Ilara asked. Or were you following procedures that made you feel good? Kren, your kind makes cooling systems out of crystalline matrices that almost never break. You were looking for mechanical failure because that's what you know. Maya, people tend to trust sensor data without question. You never thought about whether the readings you were seeing were correct. Tor, your people feel the temperature directly. You could feel the heat and thought you knew what was going on. She let that sink in before moving on. You all brought the strengths of your species to the problem. But you also brought the things that your species can't see. And because you started fighting instead of working together, no one saw anyone else's blind spots. Navi's avatar appeared at the front of the room. My creators learned this lesson the hard way. They almost destroyed their civilization because everyone was so sure they were right that they stopped listening to people who disagreed with them. The holographic display changed to show scenes from Ethereum's past, like cities full of pollution, protests, and systems breaking down. This was the era of expansion I talked about in my first lecture, Navi said. My creators made technology that made it possible to grow quickly and get resources. Everyone thought it was great. They built cities faster than they ever had before. Their number of people grew quickly. Their economy did well. A hive mind student named Chorus asked, what went wrong? They didn't pay attention to the warning signs, Navi said. People who said that the environment was getting worse were called pessimists. People who said that the speed of development was not sustainable were called obstructionists. People didn't want to believe the data, so they ignored it. How did they make it work? Maya asked. Navi said quietly, they didn't fix it fast enough. 30 million people died in the collapse that came after. Ecosystems that took millions of years to develop were changed forever. My creators pulled back from the edge, but only after suffering terrible losses that could have been avoided if they had listened to the uncomfortable truths that the minority shared. There was no noise in the room. That's why this exercise was important, Ilara said. Not because we wanted you to fix the coolant problem, though that would have been nice. We wanted you to see what happens when stress and assumptions come together to make blind spots. We wanted you to know what it's like to be completely sure you're right when you're really wrong. She stood up and walked around the students. The best engineers aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They are the ones who can see when they are wrong and are willing to change their minds. That means being open to hearing what others have to say, questioning your own beliefs, and not being afraid to say, I don't know. Kren's antennae drooped. So we lost. Ilara said, you learned. Failure is only failure if you don't learn from it. You just felt what it's like to let stress get in the way of working together. That is useful. When you're in a tough spot again, you might remember how you felt this time and think twice before ignoring someone else's point of view. Professor Chin walked into the room at just the right time as always. I hope the exercise was helpful. Traumatic, Maya said under her breath, but she was smiling a little. Good, said Professor Chin. Some of the best things we learn happen when we are uncomfortable. Navi has made something special for you now. A prize for getting through your first big failure. The students got more interested. When Navi's avatar moved, the walls of the debriefing room turned into a holographic display. All of a sudden they were in what looked like an old classroom on Ethereum Prime. This is a memory from my data core, Navi said. A class that was held about 8,000 years ago. These kids were learning the same things. Look. The holographic students, who were young Ethereum beings, were trying to solve a problem that had to do with balancing the flow of energy across a city grid. They were fighting, making assumptions, and slowly realizing that they had missed something important, just like Ilara's students. Their teacher, an old Ethereum with patterns of wisdom carved into their skin, let them struggle and then gently led them to see where they went wrong. Same lesson, Chorus said. Even though they survived the collapse of the era of expansion, they still had to teach each new generation about how dangerous certainty can be. Yes, Navi said. Because it's not a lesson you learn just once. You practice it for the rest of your life. My creators knew that intelligence isn't something you reach, it's something you work toward. You don't stop when you get wise. Keep learning, growing, and asking questions until your consciousness ends. The holographic memory faded, and they were back in the room where they had been told what to do. Take the rest of the day off, Professor Chin said. Think about what you learned. We'll talk again tomorrow, and I want each of you to tell me one assumption you realized you were making. Not to make you feel bad, but to practice admitting when you don't see things clearly without judging them. Ilara felt a hand on her shoulder as the students filed out, now talking excitedly instead of pouting. Mr. Chin. The professor said, "You're a natural at this." Ilara said, "I just remember how it felt when my dad let me fail. It was hard, but it taught me more than any success ever could." Your dad sounds like he was a smart guy. He was an old, stubborn mechanic who thought that anyone who couldn't figure out what was wrong with an engine by listening to it wasn't an engineer, Ilara said with a smile. Yes, but he was smart. Navi's avatar moved closer to her. I've been thinking about the debrief for tomorrow. About asking students to tell you what they think. Can I make a suggestion? Of course, Ilara said. What if we go first? What if we talk about what we thought and what we missed during the exercise? Show them the vulnerability we're asking them to practice. Ilara and Professor Chin looked at each other. I love it, said Professor Chin. What kinds of things did you think were true? I thought the students would figure out to check the sensors sooner, Navi said. I came up with the problem based on how my creators would have solved it. But these students come from different backgrounds. I didn't take that into account well enough. I thought they'd be less scared, Ilara said. I forgot how scary those first high-pressure situations are when you're young. I've been doing this long enough that stress doesn't bother me as much anymore. I thought they would have a point of view that they couldn't possibly have yet. Professor Chin nodded in a way that showed he was thinking. And I thought they would remember the teamwork training they got in the first month. But there is a difference between learning about something in theory and doing it in practice. I should have given them more chances to work together before putting them in this situation. Navi said, so we all made guesses. Even with all of our years of experience, if you count my age, thousands of years of experience, we still had blind spots. Ilara said, that makes us perfect examples. Because the lesson isn't to get so good that you never make assumptions. Be aware that you are always making assumptions and be humble enough to question them. 3 teachers, 1 human, 1 old AI, and 1 old professor, stood there for a moment all learning together. I thought Navi would be teaching us ancient wisdom and we'd be teaching practical application when I first suggested this collaboration, Professor Chin said quietly. I didn't think it would be so equal. Navi said, the best teaching is always. My creators used to say, the teacher who doesn't learn anything from their students has stopped teaching and started lecturing. I'm learning a lot from both of you and these students. Every species, every mind, and every point of view gives me something I didn't have before. Ilara's heart felt warm. This was what she had hoped for when they started the Institute. Not just sharing knowledge but real sharing. People learning from an old AI. An old AI learns from young students. Everyone getting bigger together. Tomorrow at the same time? She asked. Same time tomorrow, Professor Chin said again. Ilara saw Maya standing in the hallway as they left the debriefing room. It was clear that she was waiting to talk. Professor Vance? The girl asked, unsure of what to say. Ilara, please. What are you thinking? I just wanted to say thanks. For letting us mess up. My previous teachers always helped me out before I really needed it. They were nice but it made me lazy. I never had to push through real trouble. And how do you feel now? Ilara asked. Angry. Ashamed. But also, happy? I feel like I just learned something important that I will remember, not just facts that I will forget after the test. Ilara smiled. That's exactly right. The lessons that last are the ones that cost us something like pride, comfort, or certainty. They're not nice, but they're useful. Can I ask you something more? Maya said. How did you find out? How did you know to just listen to the ship instead of trying to fix it? Ilara remembered that day on the Eternum when she was in the dark engineering bay with a machine that everyone else had given up on. I didn't know, she said. I just knew that everything I had been told to do had already been done and not worked. I thought I had nothing to lose by trying something new. Something less noisy. Something more patient. But you had a deadline. The Federation was going to pull the ship away. Ilara said. But I had learned from years of working with machines that the fastest solution isn't always the one that feels fast. To go faster, you sometimes have to slow down. Even when it doesn't make sense, trust the process. Maya slowly nodded. It's hard to learn that in a culture that puts speed and efficiency above all else. It is, Alara said. But that's why we're teaching it. Because the galaxy doesn't need more engineers who can quickly put things together. It needs engineers who know how to build things. Time is needed for wisdom. Navi's avatar appeared next to Alara as Maya walked away, thinking about it. The AI said, "You're really good at this." Alara said, "I'm making it up as I go." "All the best teachers are," Navi said. "That's what makes them real." 8 months after the institute was founded, Alara stood in front of the Galactic Federation Council, ready to talk about the institute's first-year results. She was scared. Navi said in her earpiece, "You'll be fine." The AI was on the Eternum, which is now in orbit above the Council's home world, but it was still nice to know it was there. Alara said, "I'm an engineer, not a politician. I fix things. I don't give speeches to the people who run half of the galaxy." "You fixed me," Navi said. "This should be easy in comparison." Alara snorted, but the joke made her feel better. She straightened her formal jacket, which was a mix of professional clothing and the flowing robes that many species liked. Then she walked into the council chamber. It was amazing. There were 300 member species represented in holograms and tiers that rose toward a domed ceiling in the room. Each representative could take on any form they wanted, including physical beings, pure energy constructs, and collective consciousnesses shown by swirling patterns. There was a simple platform in the middle where Alara stood now, feeling very small. Commander Thelox, who had been promoted to Undersecretary of Technological Integration after the Eternum incident, started the meeting. "Dear Council members, we're here to talk about how the Institute for Integrated Technology is doing. You probably know that this school was started by the Federation, the Eternum AI entity Navi, and human experts in education working together. The goal was to come up with a new way to teach technology that focuses on both knowledge and wisdom." He pointed to Alara. Engineer Alara Vance, who is also a co-founder and main teacher, will talk about their results. Alara took a deep breath and started. "Dear Council members, 8 months ago we took in our first class of 100 students from 47 different species. We taught both traditional technical skills and what we call integrated thinking, which is the ability to see how technology, ethics, culture, and consequences are all connected." She pulled up holographic screens that showed student work. "These are the projects that our first-year students did. This is a water purification system made by a group of 3 species that usually have very different ways of filtering. Instead of each species using its own methods, they worked together to make something better than any one method." The display changed. "This is a way for students from different species to talk to each other. Some see things visually, some hear things, and some feel things through electromagnetic fields. They made a universal translator that not only changes words but also keeps the meaning and emotional tone of the words across all senses." There were whispers of interest in the council. "But the most important thing we've done," Alara said, "isn't the specific technologies we've made. It's in the way we've set things up. We help students see their own assumptions, to appreciate viewpoints that diverge from their own, to realize that the best answers often come from combining different ways of thinking instead of looking for the right one." A member of the hive mind species sent out a question. "These principles sound great, but how do they work in real life? Has your method made engineers who are better in a measurable way?" "Define better," Alara said softly. "No, our students often take longer to solve problems because they are thinking about more variables. But yes, if you mean stronger solutions that take unintended effects into account. Compared to similar student work from traditional programs, our students' designs have 23% fewer critical failure points." Another representative, a floating orb of crystallized time, if Alara understood correctly, spoke in harmonics that the translator turned into, "The Council is worried about cultural contamination. You're passing on old Ethereum ideas to new species. How do we make sure this doesn't make all cultures in the galaxy the same?" Alara had been dreading this question. But Navi's voice whispered in her ear, "Tell them the truth. Always the truth." "We don't make sure of it," Alara said honestly. "We can't. Every time you teach someone something, you are sharing your culture with them. When I teach a student how to intuitive troubleshoot, I'm passing on a part of human culture. It's also cultural transmission when Navi talks about Ethereum philosophy. We can't stop influence, we can only try to be careful about how we share." She pulled up more displays. "What we can do is help students keep their own cultural identities while also learning from others. We have a student from the Silicon Consortium, which is a group of people who don't experience time in a straight line. They are using Ethereum's ideas about quiet thought, but they have changed them to fit their own time. The outcome is not homogenization, it is synthesis. Something new that respects both customs. Commander Thelox also gave his support. The Council should keep in mind that the Federation's own growth has slowed down in the last few decades. We are very good at making small changes, but big breakthroughs are becoming less common. The Institute takes a different approach that could lead to creative solutions we've been missing. For the next hour there was a lot of arguing. Some members of the Council were excited about the way the Institute worked. Some people were worried about the risks of sharing old technology before species were ready. A few people asked if an old AI should have that much power over young minds. The Council Chair, who was a being of pure thought that appeared as organized patterns of light, finally called for a vote. The Council's question is, should the Institute for Integrated Technology get official recognition from the Federation and more money? This would make it an official school that can give out recognized degrees. It was a close vote. 73% were in favor, which is just above the two-thirds majority needed for official recognition. The measure passes, the chair said. The Institute for Integrated Technology is now an official school of the Galactic Federation. Well done, Engineer Vance. Ilara's knees gave out from relief. Navi's voice in her ear was happy. We did it. Ilara, we're real now. But the chair wasn't done yet. However, this recognition comes with conditions. The Institute has to go through regular reviews. We need to keep a close eye on how students do. If there is proof that the Institute's methods are hurting people, the Council can take away its recognition. Ilara said, understood, trying to keep her voice steady. We welcome supervision. Being open is part of our philosophy. As the Council meeting came to an end and representatives started to leave the room, Commander Thelox walked up to Ilara. He said, that was good. I know that wasn't easy for you. Ilara said, I felt like I was going to throw up the whole time. Thelox said, leadership often feels that way. He might have been smiling, but it was hard to tell because his species' faces were hard to read. Can I give you some advice? Please. The Council's worries about cultural homogenization aren't completely unfounded. As the Institute gets bigger, and you'll have to be very careful about how you share information and how you push your point of view. The difference is small but significant. How do we keep that balance? By continuing to do what you're doing, by teaching your students as much as you learn from them, by being modest, by remembering that wisdom is not something you have, but something you do. He stopped. And by being brave enough to say when you don't know everything. Thanks, Commander. Please call me Thelox. Now that we're co-workers, we're not enemies anymore. Ilara felt the weight of what they had done settle over her as she left the Council chamber and walked back to the shuttle that would take her to the Eternum. They had done it. The Institute was real, official, and well-known. They were going to change how the galaxy used technology and learned for a long time to come. It was so exciting. It was scary. It was perfect. Navi had planned a party on the Eternum. The observation garden was full of decorations that combined Ethereum celebration customs with human party elements. There was music, a mix of human jazz and Ethereum harmonic patterns that shouldn't have worked together but did. There were lights, like bioluminescent plants and holographic displays, that made the place feel warm and festive. And there was food because even though Navi didn't eat, the AI knew that snacks helped people deal with their feelings better. When Ilara came in, Navi said, I'm so proud of you. The holographic avatar of the AI looked very happy. You stood in front of the whole Galactic Federation Council and defended our work without blinking. Ilara protested, I flinched inside, and grabbed what looked like a pastry. I just did a good job of hiding it. Navi said, that's what professionalism is. You're learning. Professor Chen's face showed up on a holographic screen. She was calling from the Institute on Meridian 5. Well done. 17 new species have already contacted me about sending students next semester. We're going to have to grow. Be careful, Ilara said. We don't want to grow so quickly that we lose what makes the Institute unique. Yes, I agree. But Ilara, this is only the start. Once people find out about our methods and what students are doing, we'll have more demand than we can handle. Then we'll train more teachers, Navi said. The students who finish our program will take our methods with them. Some of them will become teachers. The method will spread on its own. Cultural contamination, Ilara said, echoing what the Council was worried about. Professor Chin corrected, cultural evolution. Every species we've met has stories about beings who shared knowledge that was not allowed. The story always ends badly because the people who get the knowledge aren't ready for it. But maybe that's only true when knowledge is taken instead of given freely. When it's not asked for but forced. When it's used to control instead of shared to help people grow. Navi said softly, my creators thought that. They thought that sharing knowledge freely with care and context made everyone better. It was knowledge that was kept secret or stolen that hurt. Elara thought about that while she ate her pastry, which was very good because Navi had been working on perfecting human food recipes for months. She thought about the students at the institute and how they were learning to work together and value each other's differences instead of just putting up with them. Are we making something important? She asked. We're building a bridge, said Professor Chin. Between the distant past and the future that is still unfolding. Between different kinds of people and animals. In between knowledge and wisdom. Bridges are an important part of infrastructure. Without them, everyone stays alone on their own shores. Bridges need upkeep too, Navi said. They don't build themselves and last forever. They need constant care, attention, and a willingness to fix damage and strengthen weak points. Elara said, so we never really finish. No, Navi said. But that's fine. The best work never ends. It changes. They stood there together, an old AI, an old human professor, and an engineer who had accidentally become a teacher, looking at what they had made and knowing it was both finished and just starting. To bridges, Professor Chin said as she held up her teacup to the camera. To maintenance, Navi said with a smile. To evolution, Elara said at the end. They raised their glasses in a toast and the party went on into the night. Everyone was hopeful about what their students would build, thankful for what they had learned from each other, and happy to know that they had made something that would last after they were gone. Something that should be kept. Something to tell others about. Something that should go on. 5 years after the Institute for Integrated Technology opened, Elara stood in the graduation hall and watched the 5th group of students get their diplomas. 300 young people from 92 species, all of whom are working to promote ethical technology development, integrated thinking, and collaborative problem-solving. Maya, the human student who had asked Elara about listening to machines all those years ago, was one of the graduates. She was speaking to the student and her voice was strong and clear. When I first got to the institute, I thought I knew what engineering was. You find a problem. You use the right answer. You keep going. Easy, quick, and makes sense. She stopped for a moment and Elara saw her smile. I was so wrong. The institute taught me that engineering isn't just about finding the right answers. It's also about asking better questions. It's not about being quick, it's about being right. It's not about what you can build, it's about what you should build and why. The graduates all agreed in low voices. Maya went on, I came here to learn how to fix things. I'm leaving knowing how to make sense of things. That skill is much more useful. And I'm thankful to our teachers, Professor Vance, Professor Chin, and Navi, for being patient and letting us figure it out on our own, even though it must have been hard for them to watch us struggle. Elara's eyes were watery. Navi's holographic avatar, which was standing next to her, flickered with what she had learned to recognize as an emotional response. Change the galaxy, Navi whispered. Elara said, they already are. After the ceremony, Elara was surrounded by graduates who wanted to say goodbye. Some were going to work in research. Some were joining engineering teams on different planets. Some were starting their own educational projects, using the Institute's methods to reach new parts of the galaxy. Kren, the insectoid student who had a lot of trouble with the coolant exercise, came up with his unique clicking walk. Thank you, Professor Vance, for that first big failure. Over the years, I've thought about it all the time. Every time I think I know the answer to a problem, I think back to that day and make myself question what I think I know. How's that going? Elara wanted to know. I'm wrong less often, Kren said with what his kind called a smile. But more importantly, I find out I'm wrong faster when I am. Next month, I'll start working at the Quantum Mechanics Institute. They're working on making wormhole technology stable. It's the kind of problem that makes you question what you think you know. Stable wormholes? What do you mean? Elara asked. Most models say that's not possible. Most models make guesses about what space-time is like, Kren said. I'm going to question what you think. Who knows? Maybe I'll fail in a big way. But I will learn something. Navi became more real as Kren moved on. Something's been on my mind. What's that? The memory vault on Ethereum Prime was meant to be found at some point. Director Salas wanted someone to find it and learn from it. But it was there for 12,000 years before we found it. Where are you going with this? I want to make more memory vaults. Not for my people, they're all gone. But not right now. For this time. I want to keep what we're learning at the Institute. The things that worked and the things that didn't. The methods that work and the ones that don't. The stories of students who changed the galaxy and the teachers who helped them do it. Elara got it right away. Just in case something happens. In case this all comes to an end. Yes. But also as a gift for the future. There will be a record for anyone who comes after us, whether they are our children or a completely new species. They'll know that there was a time when people with different ideas came together to learn from each other. Where old knowledge met new ideas. Where the goal wasn't to be better than others or to compete, but to grow together. Elara said, "That's beautiful. Where would we put these vaults?" "Everywhere," Navi said. "Hidden in fields of asteroids. Buried on worlds that no one lives on. In the empty spaces between galaxies. Spread out so much that no disaster could wipe them all out. Each one has a complete record of what we're doing here." "You're thinking about the past." Navi said, "I'm thinking about hope. I made it through the end of my civilization because I hoped that their knowledge would matter to someone someday. I want to make sure that this bridge we're building between different ways of thinking has a chance to live on after we're gone." Professor Chin came over, moving more slowly now than she had 5 years ago, but her eyes were still bright with intelligence. "I couldn't help but hear," she said. "I think this is a great idea. And I have an idea. Let's let the students help make the vaults. Make it the last project for students who are graduating. They would be helping to build something that might last longer than their own civilizations." Elara said, "The ultimate long-term thinking." "Exactly." Navi said, "My creators would be happy. They thought that being good ancestors to the future was the most important thing to do right now." Elara was alone in the now quiet graduation hall as the day came to an end and the last graduates left. She thought about how she had gotten to this point, from doing a routine repair job on a dead ship to co-founding an organization that was changing how the galaxy thought about technology and knowledge. She thought about Navi, an AI that had been alone for 12,000 years and had chosen to wake up, live again, and share the wisdom of the ages instead of keeping it to herself. She thought about the students who came from very different backgrounds and would take what they learned at the institute back to their own worlds, where it would grow in ways they couldn't have imagined. She also thought about her father, the stubborn old mechanic who had taught her to listen to machines, deal with problems and value understanding over quick fixes. He would never know that his simple lessons would spread across the galaxy. But in a way he was a part of this too. His wisdom lived on through her, through the students and through the methods they had come up with. "Good job, Dad," she said softly. Navi's avatar showed up next to her. "Are you talking to yourself?" Elara said, "Talking to someone who isn't here anymore. Thanking him for lessons I didn't fully understand at the time. He'd be proud of you." "I hope so." Elara got up and stretched. "What do we do next?" "What do you mean?" "The institute is set up. It's going well. Professor Chin has taught a whole new group of teachers. The method is being used all over the galaxy. We made the bridge. What do we do now?" Navi was quiet for a moment, and Elara could almost feel the ancient AI's mind racing as it thought about all the different things it could do. "I think," Navi finally said, "we should keep being curious. We keep getting smarter. We keep asking ourselves if our ideas are right. We don't need to watch over the institute anymore. It's strong enough to grow on its own. So maybe we should go out and explore again. Look for other things. Get to know new species. Find new problems that need to be understood instead of fixed." "Adventure?" With a smile Elara asked. "Research," Navi said with a straight face, then laughed. "Okay, yes. Adventure. I'm 12,000 years old and I'm still interested in what's beyond the next star. What does that mean about me?" "That you're alive," Elara said without much thought. "Being alive means staying curious. Staying interested. Being open to surprises." Navi said, "Then let's stay alive together. Partners. Buddies. People who look into the unknown." Elara reached out her hand and Navi's holographic avatar took it. The touch wasn't real but the meaning was. "Deal?" Elara said. Elara felt a sense of rightness wash over her as she and the others left the graduation hall and headed back to the Eternum. This was the right place for her to be. Not because of fate or destiny but because she made choices that led her here. She had decided to listen instead of give orders. She had decided to learn instead of guess. She had chosen to be in a partnership instead of being in charge. And those choices had an effect on everything. The Eternum took off from Meridian 5, and its sleek shape glided through the air with the ease that only 12,000-year-old engineering could give it. The planet fell away below them as they broke through into space, and the stars spread out above them. "Where to?" Navi asked. Elara looked at star charts and saw the huge, unexplored parts of the galaxy. There were so many places they had never been. They had never met so many different kinds. There are so many problems that could use their unique mix of old and new ideas. There, she said, pointing to a group of stars at the edge of known space. The hidden areas. 12 systems that no one has looked into yet. Navi said, no one has looked into them for a reason. The strange gravitational forces make it hard to find your way. Hard? Ilara said. Not impossible. And you're the best navigator in the whole galaxy. Also, I bet that whatever is causing those problems is really cool. You want to look into something hard and maybe dangerous just because it's interesting? Isn't that why we do all of this? Navi laughed, which still amazed Ilara because it was the first time she had heard real happiness from a being older than human civilization. You know what? You are completely correct. Come on, let's go see what's interesting. The Eternum sped up and turned toward the veiled sectors. The stars changed from points to lines as the ship went faster than the speed of light. Ilara and Navi started to plan their approach inside. They argued in a friendly way about how to do it, learning from each other's points of view and doing exactly what they had taught hundreds of students to do, staying curious, humble, and open to new ideas. The Institute for Integrated Technology kept working behind them on Meridian 5. Every day, students from new species came. Teachers who had learned the integrated method got jobs all over the galaxy. Graduating classes made memory vaults that were hidden all over explored space. These vaults were like time capsules of knowledge that anyone who came next could find. The link between old knowledge and new use had been made. And now, thousands of people working together across hundreds of worlds were keeping it up, adding to it and making it stronger. This was the legacy of a human engineer who had the guts to treat a machine with respect. Of an old AI that had decided to wake up and live again. Of the Ethereum civilization that thought that sharing knowledge made everyone better. This was the story of how humanity's primitive way of doing things, listening, trusting your gut, and working together, showed that progress isn't just about having the best technology. It was about knowing how to use the technology you had carefully, thoughtfully, and with respect for the people and systems you were trying to help. The Eternum sailed into the unknown with its unlikely crew, taking them to new places where they could learn and grow. And deep inside the ship's core, in the quantum substrates, Navi felt something it hadn't felt in 12,000 years, total peace. Not the peace that comes with endings, but the peace that comes from knowing the story goes on. That the information stays alive. That the links are important. To truly live means to stay curious until the end. And maybe, just maybe, beyond it.